Hello, story number 20 here with a bonus story. I decided, I would think number 20 would be, since how 19 and 19A were about this place I just moved out of a year ago, about the land, and I've got a story about what happened inside the trailer. A lot to be said there. But I'm kind of ruminating on that, what to tell on that one. There was quite a bit. It was one of these places where things happened all the time. And some of it, I'm not sure, involves other people. Um, I'll get to that story when I get to it. For now, I'm going to move on because I have a lot of stories to cover. And I want to cover the first two paranormal events that happened to me after I saw the angels. Because things just kept happening to me up through my childhood, right on up to present. So, I'm going to tell the first story, the voices of a doomed aircraft. And that story happened when I was about 6 or 7, probably 7. And at that time, living in San Jose, California. And my father had transferred there. He was an engineer. I think he had wanderlust. He just liked to move around the country a lot. And that's what he did. Every few years, we'd pack up and we'd go to some totally different place. And he had good jobs. He was working for NASA, that kind of engineer, that designs electronics and things. He designed quite a bit of things, designed parts for the space shuttle. He designed the suspension system on the military's M113 armored personnel carrier, which actually is long out of use. Some countries probably using it somewhere, but that saw a good 30 years service in the U.S. military. And so anyway, that's what we were doing in San Jose. What I was doing, I was being a kid. And we lived on the outskirts of the suburb because I know where our house was, behind it, it was all just grass, sandy grass, whatever, no houses. So, this particular day, sunny summer day, not a cloud in the sky, and that plays into this because this is about an aircraft. That's my dog walking around on the hardwood floor. If you hear clickety clack. Every time I start sitting down to tell these, my basset hound gets angsty and he hears my voice and he wants attention. I don't know how many times I've had to remake these because I'm poor guy. I apologize, I digress. On this day, I got off the school bus alone and I had to walk around my block, and our house was just around the block, maybe 3 or 4 minutes walk. And I got off that school bus and there was nobody around, no kids. I can't tell you the details. I just remember I got off the school bus alone and started walking around the block alone. And all of a sudden I hear voices. I heard voices. I heard a man's voice. And it was coming from up above me. And he was yelling. He was saying desperately, "Help us. Help us. Get help. Please help us." And it was a man's voice. It had like a metallic, I remember, because I'm thinking about this as a child, right? And I look up and I see this jet, just a sliver of a jet up above, making a vapor trail, a small silver sliver of a jet. And the voices were coming from that jet. I knew they were. And I, even then, scratching my head, thinking, how could this be happening? I couldn't figure out how's this guy talking to me from that jet. But yet he kept saying, help us, get help. Please help us, get help us, please. Over and over. And it sounded, in my child's mind, I thought, it sounded like he had like a megaphone on the bottom of his jet and he's broadcasting it to me. I knew that wasn't possible even at my age, but it had kind of a metallic sound to his voice. It kept going, help us, help us. And at first I felt kind of kind of entertained, amused, and bewildered. And I'm standing there alone. And then I started feeling sorry because the voice was persistent, calling to me for help. And it was the same guy's voice. Help us, get help, please. Help us, get help. And I started feeling sad for him. And I said aloud, finally, I said, I can't help you. I'm down here. And that's when it stopped. That's when he stopped calling for help. And I thought that was pretty bewildering, even at my age then. I mean, you know, so I walked home and it's just one thing, I remember this. I got home, I remember our front door was open, I just remember that, and our TV was on. We were the first ones on our block to have a color TV. Great big monster of a thing. And that was going, and I walked past that, and I did something in the kitchen or something, as I recall. And then I heard on the TV a bulletin came on. I think I was home maybe 5 minutes. And a bulletin came on saying that a jet had crashed in the mountains nearby, Air Force jet. Both pilots were killed. And that's that. That's that story. And even then I thought, well, how could this have happened so quick? How did I hear? It's almost like there was a time slip. And that's the story. That's all I can tell you about that one. These ones from my early childhood are going to be a little scarcer, but I'm not going to embellish anything. That's how I recall it happening. And that's a short story, so I'm going to add one that happened before that, when I was still in Albuquerque, New Mexico, after I saw the angels, which is story number 1. This is probably the next paranormal thing to happen to me. And we lived, I remember the name of the road, Del Mar Road in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Del Mar Road. And there was an arroyo, and that's what we called it. I guess it's a Spanish name for a large stream bed behind our house. And it was deep and wide, and it was usually dry. It flooded once in a while, I guess, when they'd have the rains in the nearby Sandia Mountains and such. Once in a while it'd be really flooded, wicked, dangerously flooded. But most of the time it was just a sandy place I like to play in, actually. Climb down the banks into it. Well, one night I was visiting my friend, and they were our neighbors. But our house was here with a road. This is the front of the house. The arroyo came out here, and then we'd go this way, and there was a bridge, a small bridge, and my friend's house was on the other side of it. Very small bridge. So I was coming home from my friend's house, and it was dark out. And as I was walking across the bridge, this is what I saw. A man of light. It was nighttime. And there was one man. He was in a stream bed. And he was walking right down the stream bed, coming towards me. And I saw him, and his whole body, he was like he was made out of light. And he was just striding, walking. I could see his arms moving, and his whole body, head to toe, was light. And it was nighttime. And honestly, that scared me. And I thought it was cool, but the closer he got to me, suddenly I got scared and I ran home. And that's that story. I don't know to this day what that was. In my child's mind, I thought he must have had light bulbs all over his body. I remember thinking that he must have had light bulbs all over his body. But there's a man made out of light. He was all light. Just strolling down that stream bed coming towards me. And yeah, that's it. I ran home. I remember I told my mom about it. I told her about it. And I got in trouble for being out late. And she didn't seem to care to hear about that. Didn't even take a note of it. But I was pretty frightened, I recall. I was really frightened. Actually, that scared me. And most of these things didn't scare me, but that scared me. So that's story number 20. Voices from a Doomed Aircraft. and the Man of Light bonus story. I wanted to get those out of the way. And I'm going to move on through my childhood. I've got more stories. I got one I call Spartacus Meets the Poltergeist. That's coming up. So I got a whole bunch of them. And some of them aren't very pleasant. You know, I can talk about these and get a chuckle out of it and such. But the time between it, you know, but like for me to tell the things that happened this past a year ago, that's pretty fresh with me. And some of it was pretty disturbing and upsetting. I'll tell that story soon enough when I get around to it. And there's some other stories that were pretty disturbing to me, disruptive to my life, I should say. I would say disruptive. And I'll get to those, each in its own time. But I want to get them all done. Okay, thank you. Till the next story. Have a good night. Merry Christmas, too.